And I will call to order this Mount Shasta Planning Commission meeting, October 15th, 2024. And let us start with the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Jeff, go ahead and do the roll call, please.
Commissioner Boinger?
Present.
Commissioner Sariano?
Here.
Commissioner Beck?
Here.
Commissioner Higuera?
Here.
Commissioner McCarthy?
Here.
Chair Findlay? Absent. Commissioner McDowell? Absent.
Okay. It is now time for public comment, and this is for anyone who wishes to speak on anything that is not on this agenda. Yes, please state your name. And
Hi, I'm Evan Drake. I joined the meeting a couple months ago with a couple people from the Siskiyou Housing Alliance. We're speaking about tiny houses and housing cooperatives. I'm just reaffirming our interest in developing a route for tiny house legality in Siskiyou County. I think one commissioner, Mr. Beck, you weren't here, but we're a group who's working on finding ways of community development in Siskiyou County for the working class. I'm on my own tonight, and I apologize, I have to leave pretty much directly after this comment. I have a birthday party to get to, but wanted to just come back and reestablish the connection, and also perhaps I can reach out electronically or something in the coming. Okay.
Yeah, directly to me. Great.
Perfect. All right. Great. That's all I have.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to say for the record that I've given this, just want to say for the record that I've given a lot of thought to the concept of tiny houses, and I've been reading on them, so just so I can learn more and understand more about them.
Okay, thank you. Are we taking public comment online still?
No.
Okay, we're not. Okay, well, nobody else is in the audience, so we will move right along to the consent agenda. And Jeff, why don't you take it away and tell us all about it.
Yeah, just so consent agenda just has approval of minutes. So if everybody is comfortable with those, we'll need a motion and a vote.
I move to approve the minutes on the consent agenda of August 20th, 2024.
Here, have a second.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we approved the minutes. Forgot about that, Jeff, sorry. And we can start the public hearing now. So, Jeff, you can
Okay.
take it away here.
Great. So the item before you is the recommendation going to council to approve objective design standards by adding Ordinance 1850 to the municipal code. So officially this is a municipal code amendment. Before I get into the details, I'll do a little housekeeping to explain the paperwork in front of you. 10 or so days ago, I distributed the packet. It contained a staff report, a resolution, and the full set of objective design standards with changes that you all recommended be made at the last time we met. So that was back in August. As you know, we canceled the September meeting so I could get ready for this meeting. This evening, I have handed out a revised staff report, a revised resolution, and revised attachment B, which is the objective design standards, the ordinance, and the objective design standards themselves. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. The substantive difference between those two documents is that between the time that I submitted this stuff all to the 60-odd people on our email blast, so that includes you all, council, staff, and a whole bunch of a whole bunch of interested staff, community members who want to receive this material. We received a lot of great input from primarily two public commenters. those comments and staff responses are also in front of you. And we also received a little bit of input from staff and members of commission. Accordingly, I've made it clear in the staff report which is what. So under background on the staff report, I'd like to bring your attention to the 6 items that were changed after the last Planning Commission meeting pursuant to your directive. Those are the annual review, and I identify the page where you will find it in attachment B, ministerial review statement, an adjustment to standards statement, a voluntary discretionary review option, the preface in the volcanic legacy highway as a overview to the purpose of the character section of the standards, and then finally the specificity related to ground floor windows for each of our building types. Under item 2, where it says additional staff recommendations, I want to bring your attention to a few things.
Jeff, can I
Yes, please.
interrupt you just for a second? Any changes on here? Are there any ramifications of timeliness or anything like that?
No.
Because they don't want it.
No.
I can only imagine the outcry. So.
No. You guys can change the material in the record up to the point of a vote or a motion. That goes into the written record and moves forward to council. So this is very, very iterative and very living material. So if anything I say prompts comments, if we have public comments or the comments in front of you prompts desired changes, it's up to you to make those and enter them into the record. Be specific about it, and we can move forward to council. It does not have to be renoticed. So in section 2 in the staff report, so the top of the second page of the staff report, there are a few changes. The first one is site design standards. I went through and did what staff normally does, which is to conduct what we call a code audit. So it's to look at the existing code that is in draft form, the objective design standards, and compare it with the rest of the municipal code, and specifically the development standards that are contained in Title 18, our zoning chapter. I also look to make sure that there is internal consistency within the objective design standards themselves. And what I noticed glaringly was that with respect to site design standards B4.1A, 1, vehicle area, which appears on page ODS 6, we prohibited parking between the primary structure and a street, with one exception, and well, with a few exceptions. Primary among them and leading the way was projects under 10 units. What I realized was that to maintain internal consistency within the document, there were building type standards that conflicted with that. And they are. The number of units per site for townhomes is 5. The number of units per site for cottage court is 9. And the number of units per site for pocket neighborhoods is 4. Under those standards, with the exception for less than 10 units, we would have essentially obviated those standards, rendered them unnecessary, okay? That's an internal inconsistency. So what I did was turn 10 into 3. And what that did was say, if you do any typology in these documents, inside the standards themselves, within those building typologies, and they're less than 3, you can park between the building and the street. If, however, you're over 3, which means you are a fourplex or anything more dense and above, you still have to comply with our standards and tuck the parking away behind the building or recess it, et cetera, per the standards. So that's the justification for making that particular change. I'm happy to take any questions from you on the one by one, or I can go through these right now, whatever you want. Clarification, questions on that item alone. Okay, seeing none, moving on to number 2. Table A permits or lists the permitted building types. It's on ODS page 14. It prohibits duplexes in the R1 district. That was a revision because the internal inconsistency with the municipal code And this new addition would be essentially exceeding the density permissions within the existing code, specifically because under the current R1 standards, duplexes are not permitted. So I removed the permission for duplexes within R1. So essentially what that's saying is that R1 stays status quo. We are not adding any changes in densification, changes in land use permission, or anything else to R1. Okay?
Can you put an EDU?
Yes.
ADU.
ADU, of course.
One of them.
Yeah, now,
There's
How about an
education,
EDU?
and there's
Yeah, okay, I just wanted, that, but not an official duplex.
yeah, I want to make clear that the fluid state of objective design standards relative to state law is going to be guiding staff as we move forward. It's very likely that we will be doing updates to this at least annually. And in fact, I would even advise that it take place on a greater frequency than that. So when I've got my ear to the rails on state law changes and it affects the contents of these documents moving forward, you'll hear about it right away and we'll make the change and we'll go up to council.
Okay.
So it wouldn't matter for R1 though, none of the things about the way things look, buildings look or anything, that doesn't change either?
Yeah, R1 stays is silent in these standards.
Okay.
Yep. Item number 3, there are A, B, C, D, E, 5 changes that staff are recommending in response to public comments. And I'll go through those one by one. The commentor in this case was Brian Brennan, 604 Chestnut Street, brought up some great points about essentially what I'll refer to as kind of sharpening the spear. There's no content here that really changes the intent of the document. It just makes it a little more internally consistent and a little more, adds clarity to areas and certainty to certain subsections. Leading the way is the 1850-030 Part 1A4, which is preservation of the visual environment. And that is a purpose statement which staff are recommending we revise as follows. The original language simply said, location and screening of building mass and parking areas to mitigate visual impacts of development and preserve visual resources. That seemed to be lacking the full and complete contents of the subsection, so we just front-loaded that and added it to the purpose statement. So it says, the recommended revised language is location and screening of building mass, dark sky lighting, building step down, and screened parking areas serve to mitigate visual environments of development and preserve visual resources. The justification being that it's just a more complete intent statement that references the full scope of the standards. Similar, section 1850-030, part 1B31, exterior lighting, which occurs on page ODS-5. We've added 2 standards that kind of front load the list there. A now reads, lighting shall be used sparingly only where targeted and when controlled timing needed for an essential purpose is regulated by these standards. So again, it's just saying that as much as that needs to be or can be measurable and binary, we need to ensure that the lighting plan contains specificity to get to that determination for the essential purpose of lighting. So that it really gets rid of the extraneous lighting on the edge of a property that's uplit for some non-essential purpose. Low illumination is item B now, and it says that illumination levels shall be no brighter than necessary as conveyed in lighting plan. And that is a subset requirement per item 3.1E and B of warmer color wavelength. The justification there is, again, that these standards are more complete to convey the purpose and intent of capturing light and making sure that it doesn't bleed off site. So those 2 provisions, again, help kind of sharpen that spear.
I have,
Yeah.
so, people talk about lumens and the numbers of, what are the numbers of low illumination? I don't know enough about that kind of stuff myself.
That's, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's where the discretion comes in a little bit here. Lighting is, we decided to stay silent on lumens. The reason was that different purposes are suited to different light levels. So that if we can demonstrate through our lighting plan that lighting that's intended to light a pedestrian pathway is different in terms of absolute need to protect life, health, safety than an entrance to a parking area where you need perhaps more lighting, or safety and security lighting, motion lighting, etc. We decided to stay silent on that. Over time, if we are at a discretionary level with objective standards, determining that there is a threshold that we're finding consistent, we can add specificity to include lumens. And we can certainly go further and deeper in lighting should you guys want to specify. I would just give you a word of caution that it is a slippery slope with respect to where to set those standards.
Always has been.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Item D, section 1850, part 1B, 4.3, landscaping and parking lots. It appears on ODS page 7. Excellent suggestion to include solar panel statement that would offset the requirements for landscaping. So what we did was add perimeter and interior landscaping requirements may be reduced by up to 75% with the provision of equal coverage of solar panels. So that's a one-for-one trade. Every percent of coverage that you add with a solar panel reduces that percentage of coverage up to a maximum of 75% of interior landscaping. The logic being that we're encouraging solar coverage of surface parking lots, but we're only doing so up to a point of 75%, with the logic that 25% remainder helps kind of buffer or soften visually the solar array to the public viewer.
Yeah, where did we get that number, 75%?
75% exists in that existing subsection for permeable pavement.
Okay,
So same 75% applies.
all right.
So that wouldn't apply for solar panels on the roof, is that correct?
That is correct.
This would
They
be
are already essentially
covering-
mandated. Yeah.
Covering parking or
Right,
some
right.
trellis or something.
Parking lot specific only. And then finally, section 1850, part 1B6, scenic resources and vistas. I added specificity to this to relate to code compliant projects. There's been a lot of public misunderstanding around the fear that we are, with objective design standards, trying to capture the sum total of regulations that are applied to a future development. That is not the case. It is very explicit in our administrative section of 1850 that we only review code compliant projects. Code compliant projects are defined in the subsection, and they are projects that comply with all other applicable codes. So that includes the general plan, particularly the conservation element, particularly conservation element policies that refer to visual impacts on hillsides, ridges, exposed slopes, and so on. So scenic resources and vista content in ODS is in no way intended to supplant that consistency, those consistency standards that exist in our general plan. They are intended to augment. I want to make that really, really clear. A lot of folks in the public are concerned that we're putting all of our eggs into one basket on the visual resources front, which is step back from public rights-of-way. We're not doing just that alone. We're, again, sharpening the spear to ensure that we control the public right-of-way frontage, which is the majority of our views, our public views, down a corridor, which is a right-of-way and a paved street of a mountain in one direction or another. And by stepping back at a 45-degree angle, we are opening that cone of view to the higher altitude views of our mountains. That's the intent. There are other beneficial components or consequential conditions which could be viewed as a benefit, such as increased light, air, shadow to public streets, to development itself. You're also providing an opportunity for development to add rooftop terraces, balconies, and other components that where people can get out and get good views as well. And though those aren't necessarily public views, they are somewhat private views, but you can imagine if on Lake or the Boulevard, overstory housing was built on top of Fifth Season, for example, the requirement would be to step back at that 45-degree cone, and people would likely or could potentially occupy that, getting views themselves. So it's increasing private views, it's protecting public views, and it is increasing light, air, and visual access to our rights of way. So it's a multifaceted set of conditions and improvements and benefits, and they are intended to augment everything in the general plan, not supplant it.
I have a question. So with that thought of putting a second story on the Fifth Season thing and having a terrace so they could see the mountain, what if somebody on the next street, Chestnut, wanted to build something that would block that private view, like a two-story building with a terrace? Because this is, one of the problems when you start raising heights of buildings, is that you might cut somebody off from the sun or the mountain or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how that gets addressed. I mean, yeah.
We've talked about this, and the subcommittee batted this around, and we've brought it here before public, that a broad sweeping limitation of height limits or reduction of height limits is tantamount to a taking. We have decided to stay clear of reduction of height limits to protect all private views, because my private view is not your private view, and there are many thousands of private views in this city that would be impossible to protect. It is highly challengeable and has been challenged successfully in other communities. By going vertical and eroding that building mass away from the public rights of way, you can imagine that corridor, that visual corridor, is reinforced vertically. So it just isn't the street. If someone puts a balcony on top of Fifth Season, and then the little real estate office gets redeveloped someday next to it, they will also be required to step back, thereby preserving and expanding that view corridor as you go vertical. That's the intent. You can't protect all private views over the tops of buildings laterally at mid-block. That is just, where do you stop?
Yeah.
So
okay.
That's where staff is recommended to the subcommittee and to you all that we draw the line. And I think that by doing step backs on all of our public rights of way, we're creating a very porous visual environment where public views are most prevalent.
I guess you better start thinking about buying property and that might possibly block your view someday, because that's the only remedy.
It happens all the time.
Yep.
That is the end of my summary of the staff report. I do want to bring up a couple of other things before I turn it over to you. The resolution, attachment A to your staff report, there has also been some considerable confusion and assertions as to the viability of a common sense exemption to CEQA. Staff have previous experience in other cities, and in large part the contents of this material are derived from that experience. I have always made that very, very clear. I think that I've brought forward to the subcommittee and to you all recommendations which, by my judgment, are factually and conceptually analogous to the challenges that we will face. Both of my previous cities were small towns of populations of less than 5,000 or in that vicinity, and both of them had development typology, market expression, and support that we share. And that's what's reflected in our objective design standards. In both of those cities, there were the same objective design standards, CEQA exemption, that is the common sense exemption. What I have done to make it clear that those findings are explicit and clear is add the components on pages, sorry about the page numbering or the lack thereof, but on the second page and third page of the resolution, there are extensive statements as to fact-finding around potential impacts or lack thereof with respect to aesthetics, agricultural, forestry, biological, cultural, geology, soils, air quality, energy, greenhouse emissions, hazardous waste, hazardous materials, population, housing, public services, and so on. So I don't need to reiterate those, but suffice it that we've had city attorney look at this numerous times. I've looked at the case law around objective design standards and the legal defensibility of the common sense exemption for objective design standards, and I'm very comfortable with that. And that's reflected in the reso. Finally, before I turn it over to you, there were 3 public comments. The first was from Mr. Brennan, as I've mentioned. His comments and staff responses are here, as well as 2 from Dale LaForest, representing
Yeah.
They don't represent anybody.
Mount
There's no
Shasta.
such thing as an entity
Mount
called
Shasta tomorrow. His first was received yesterday afternoon. His staff responses are boxed accordingly. And then the second was received this morning. I responded with in-box text accordingly. There's a great deal in there that, in my estimation, let me just leave it at that staff has been very clear about the relevance of these comments in the box text, and I don't need to add airtime to it. If you have any questions about any of those comments, my responses, or anything in the reso or the staff reports or the contents of the document, it's your turn to ask me, and I'm happy to get into the weeds if you want to go there.
Excuse me?
Very good. Guess we'll just go through down the line here and see who has any questions or clarifying comments or anything. So why don't we start with Vaughn?
Okay, thank you, Toussaint. Just to get it on the record, there's no legal entity in California called Mount Shasta Tomorrow. I checked as late as this afternoon on the Secretary of State's. This is a suspended corporation since 2000. This is a suspended corporation since 2018. Just for the record, to put it on there. So I'm not sure why somebody bothers to make it sound like there's something they're not. They're not a legal entity in California. The next thing I had was the comments on fencing. Couple thoughts on the fencing is, I thought there was a lot of thought put into some of these statements by Mr. Brennan, but he hasn't thought about kids. Kids are short. Some kids are shorter than 4 feet. So that's something that needs to be pointed out when he's on that particular view of things. Number one. Number 2 is, I don't know, maybe a philosophical view of worrying about deer over flowers. Deer over flowers with regards to fencing. I'm kind of of the mind that they were here first, the deer. And so if you want to plant flowers someplace, put it where you don't think the deer will get them. But that's about the extent of that. But I appreciate the responses that your department made to these other statements, Jeff. They were clear and concise and to the point. That's it.
Is that it? Okay.
Nothing.
Okay, nothing?
Nothing.
Nothing? How about you, Patty? No? Okay. I will just say, yeah, I appreciate all the responses that you made to these commenters, and I appreciate Brian Brennan's very constructive comments here, that you were able to bring some of them into this ODS standard. So there's no public comment here, so.
I just wanted to say that it's, you know, when people send us emails and letters like this, to me, it would be more helpful if they had like a little bit better, you know, suggestion. A lot of times it's just, everything you're doing is wrong, this is wrong, that is wrong, that is wrong. We hear it every month from the same 1 or 3 people, and at least this one letter offered ideas, and that's constructive. That is solution-minded thinking, and that's much better than just criticizing everything. So I just had to say that on the record.
If I may, we should, given this is a public hearing, we should, for the record, open the public hearing, ask if there are any comments. Seeing none, because we have an empty chamber, close
Indeed.
the public hearing.
Okay, we will open and quickly close the public hearing because there is no one in attendance.
So the one thing I wanted to be more specific about the fencing on corners and such. I was talking about kids around, you know, walking on streets, crossing streets, that sort of thing. That that didn't really, I don't think, register in this letter here. But I agree completely with Commissioner Beck that at least there was some sort of, sometimes I'm just not understanding the point of view, I guess, that somebody's trying to put forward, because it doesn't ever seem positive, doesn't ever seem to be different. And in all reality, I don't understand what the point of the exercise is. So I do like the constructive way you handled it, and I just want to make a note of that on the record.
Thank you.
Well, are there any other comments or anything from anybody here?
Are we at staff comments? Is that what you're saying? I'm sorry, we haven't gotten there yet.
Not yet.
Okay. All right.
If nobody has any more comments, then I think it's time to make a motion.
Yes. I make a motion to approve the resolution PC 204XX. Is that it? Yes.
By the way, is this something we need to do in 2 parts, Jeff? One for the CEQA exemption, or can we do it all in the same?
You can, yeah, the reso has findings for both. So, yeah, you can specify though and make it clear that as the recommendation says to approve a reso attachment A, recommending, and read that.
So, yes, so I move to approve the resolution PC 2024XX Attachment A, recommending City Council amend the Mount Shasta Municipal Code, adding Ordinance 18.50, Objective Design Standards, Attachment B, with findings of CEQA categorical exemption, Common Sense Section 15061B3.
All in favor?
Oh, do we have a second?
Oh, we didn't give a second. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay. And we approved this recommendation unanimously.
Yeah, we're good.
And we can now move on to commission and staff comments. Do you have anything for us, Jeff?
Yeah, let's see. So received great news from HCD that our housing element was certified. I think I mentioned the previous meeting in August that we had a few clerical changes to make. They were made. They were quickly turned around to HCD. So we now have a compliant housing element, which means we are in compliance with the prerequisites for grant funding. So that's leading the way of benefits. The second really set of implications is that as you recall, we had over, almost 24 programs in that housing element that effectively directed staff and this body to comply. So there are a list of housing element programs in here that go into a great bit of detail about what is going to be keeping us busy at a staff level for the foreseeable future. There are timely and measurable implementation metrics that we are going to be required to comply with. And if we don't, we're going to hear about it from HCD. They'll send us a nastygram and they'll say, you missed your reporting deadline, you're no longer eligible for grant funding, the grant funding that you do have is in jeopardy, et cetera. So there are consequences to non-compliance. What I will be doing is over the next 30 days, and I hope to bring this to you at our next meeting at the end of November, is to provide a bit of a matrix, if you will, a list of all the programs in one column, and then the implementation steps that are kind of up to you guys and me, and then a timeline for having to do that based on what we said we'd do in the housing element. So you'll quickly see that it's going to feel kind of daunting. There's a lot of substance in the detail here. It's pretty heady stuff. So it'll be education on the fly a little bit. But I think the objective design standards and the housing element adoption were a good primer for you. So I think it's going to get easier, but it's going to be busy for the foreseeable future.
Jeff, I tried not to edit your document that you had mentioned in the emails, but there's that last line where we're not the city of Calistoga.
Yes, I did correct that. Yeah, that error in the resolution.
Okay, thank you.
That's why I did mention that I did borrow and in some cases steal from jurisdictions who have done excellent work.
Well, at least you know I read the stuff you send us.
Under the advisement of excellent staff. So I did catch that. Thank you.
All right.
Is that it?
And that's all I've got on comments.
All right, and any commission comments? Patty, do you have any comments or questions about you?
Yeah, just a very brief summary on the progress at the Nest and then the Danco project.
Yeah, so the Nest is very close to final issuance of building permit. We expect that occupancy is probably 30 to 90 days out. They still have a fair amount of work to do, but they've been issued all permits, so they're in really good shape. They had to start from the right-of-way and work their way in, and from the shell and work their way out, so they had a lot of work to do. I still think that their pro forma is well within what we are calling missing middle income housing. It probably, we have yet to determine whether or not it'll be deed restricted, affordable at any level, but that's somewhat moot because they weren't asking for additional floor area or any kind of density bonus provision. So more on that. I'll keep you updated as that moves along. And then the other one was Danco. Same story there, but we're still waiting for building permit submittal. They're pulling funding together. Nothing's changed in their pro forma as far as staff are aware. But it's essentially construction funding is what we're waiting for, financing.
Are they well within the time limits? Or
yeah, we're in fine shape there.
Okay.
And then finally, I just was approached by a citizen who complained to me of the condition of the street, their street, Berry Street, the pavement. I didn't get a chance to drive down there and take a look. So I said I'd say something, and I did.
We are, Public Works, Ken Kellogg is doing a great job at pulling federal and state funding together to begin a complete streets overhaul. So
Nice.
starting
Great.
That's great.
So that's underway for sure.
Okay, that's about it for me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Belinda?
Nothing.
No? Vaughn?
Yep.
I just have a question on the mailers that went out about, when is it, next Monday's meeting that's going to talk about the daylighting of the creek that's going through. Do you know anything about that? And also the the two one-way streets, Chestnut and Mount Shasta Boulevard?
I know that it's very much in a, let's see, a visioning discussion, at best. It might be touching on concept options sooner than later. I've not seen anything yet. There have been lots of concepts floated, but I haven't seen any official submittals at the city level.
Okay, I guess we'll know more on Monday.
Yeah, how it all comes together, how it works, how public investments inspire private investment is going to be the crux of that conversation, I believe. Yes.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing more, we,
Future.
oh yeah, the future agenda items. Was there anything on here, Jeff?
I do want to bring attention to the tiny house ordinance that was brought up by our public comment earlier, and then also in August, we did have a group of folks here. Since then, this has occupied most of my time, the ODS stuff, but soon I will be bringing before you as a discussion topic, hopefully by November, the beginnings of a tiny house ordinance. So stand by on that. As I said, the implementation around housing element, that's coming. And likely, just heads up, Eugene Sway's project up on the hill there is coming back. We've released an RFP for CEQA work, so initial study, mitigated negative declaration, or an EIR. So we were writing a flexible scope to do an initial study to figure out what those degree of impacts are, because it is purported to be a net zero project, but it also is subterranean and requires a fair amount of excavation. Conceptually, Mr. Sway is committed to no net off-site export of soil, so it's all retained on-site. We still have some high-level concerns around the size of the facility, the potential to draw visitors, i.e. Parking demands. There's a lack of specificity around how the exterior of the site is treated, so we have lighting issues to deal with and so on. So it's a matter of detail, it's a matter of environmental consequence and impact, it's a matter of CEQA compliance, well before we can determine whether or not that application is complete, and only then will you guys be seeing a complete application before you. He may come and throw out a concept to get some early concept level review from you. We're targeting November, December for that. So you might be seeing a little bit of that.
Where is this project?
It is next to Mountain Medics, roughly.
It's what?
Next to Mountain Medics.
Oh, by Spring Hill?
Yeah, sorry, Spring Hill. You know where Mountain Medics is, up on the Spring Hill?
Yeah,
north?
Okay, it's still that site.
Yeah.
I was just wondering.
Yeah.
You said up on the hill and I was going,
Well, I see that as up.
that's what you,
Everything's,
yes, no.
everything's up that way.
You know, Jeff, one question I had about the small housing. Is the intent to have some sort of like some sort of zoning, like an R zoning, that would be separate, so it would just be neighborhood of these small houses versus having them in one lot in the regular house, and, you know, that sort of thing?
Well, the conversation that we had back in August centered on consistency of that development typology with objective design standards. And within the objective design standards, as you recall, we do have let me see if I can.
I mean, I can think of it. I know down in Newport, for example, there's some waterfront properties, but they're all that way. They're not, you know, it's not salt and pepper, it's not big house, little house, and then it gets to the big houses, but it's small houses in this one section.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if that's kind of like the general idea.
Well, it is a pocket neighborhood typology. So it is these smaller cottage scale, detached, single family dwelling, small single family dwellings that are massed on a site pursuant to objective design standards. The idea is that within that three-dimensional envelope, pursuant to those standards, could you fit a tiny home? And if the answer is, well, maybe, or yes, then, well, what does it look like and what kinds of design criteria, guideline standards would you want to dress that box up with so that it looks and feels like cottage court and not RV park? So that's the thrust of the challenge.
Yeah, and that really is
Yeah.
too. That's everything. So I was just thinking of a concept of maybe like a tiny home subdivision or something of that nature.
Well, we have the, if for example, we moving forward, now that we've adopted ODS, or at least recommended council adopt it, moving forward, presumably, the question would become on the tails of this, through you to council, that very question is, we have a development typology here that's created this three-dimensional envelope for a small clustered courtyard kind of residential expression. Could we fill that box with something on wheels and still pass the test in the zones that we are allowing this pocket neighborhood zoning, so R2, R3, and C1, C2. So to your point, they could be peppered all over the place if and only if they were compliant with the standards as we've intended here. Because a pocket neighborhood, if it's on a foundation, can be done in R2, R3, C1, and C2 as well. So that'll be your call. What I hope to present to you next month is some clear choices around what that ordinance looks like.
Yeah, the idea with wheels doesn't sound exciting, because to me that is a mobile home,
So skirting is always a way to get around that, requiring that the wheels be dropped and they be put on either a temporary or permanent foundation. Those are options. What we're trying to do at the request and interest of a community group is to, under the pro-housing initiative, address that typology, which in some communities it has been addressed. Most of the precedent code that we've reviewed at the staff level doesn't go as far as creating villages beyond RV parks. They have gone so far in San Diego and San Jose and Santa Cruz and elsewhere, and great examples in Oregon as well, where they are treated as synonymous with ADUs. So you could put an ADU in anywhere pursuant to ADU law, and in those communities you can do it either on a foundation or wheels. They're viewing those interchangeably.
So do tiny homes have to have wheels?
By definition,
They're-
they are tiny homes with wheels. Yeah. Now, some communities were understandably nervous about creating this purveyance of this RV typology, and set very explicit standards that either the wheels be removed, skirted, or clad in some kind of foundation material so that they look like cottage clustered development.
Yeah.
With design standards so that, if one comes and moves in a year, the one that replaces it is substantially conforming by aesthetics to what was there, or what is allowed on that site. So you have choices about what do you do with the aesthetics, what do you do with continuity and consistency over time, what do you do with the utility infrastructure associated with each of these things? Is there common
lot
utility
size is
treatments,
another thing.
et cetera? Yeah, right. So there's a lot to be discussed, and it's precedent-setting code. It's very innovative, so it's exciting from that standpoint.
I'm excited to see it, the first pass. Well, anybody else? All good? Then we
I'm
will,
going to voice my trepidation.
yeah. We will adjourn this planning commission meeting of October 15th, 2024. Thanks, everybody.
Look like a cottage.
Just